Let's bring in my next guest, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott, welcome to the show. There's a whole lot of issues I'd like to get views from you on, but I want to start with comments you wrote in News Corp papers over the weekend that anti-Semitism, you said, in Australia is out of control and that the government needed to do more. Yesterday, it looked like the PM was finally understanding the gravity of what's happened, but overnight, Australia's yet again voted against Israel, and it looks like we're holding them to a higher standard than any other country. Indeed, it's hard not to feel as though these votes in the UN are in fact rewarding terrorism.
Peter, we have to understand that anti-Semitism is a species of racism, and you can't be against some racism. You've got to be against all racism. Now, it was great that the Prime Minister was against racism at a synagogue in Sydney yesterday, but then today Australia voted in favour of racism at the UN because voting for an immediate ceasefire is rewarding Hamas, and Hamas want to bring about a new Holocaust of the Jewish people. So I just think there's a double standard here. I think it's reprehensible. And really, we don't just need to call out anti-Semitism, we need to stamp it out.
You've made some pretty strong comments in the media that we need to accept that immigration has changed this country and we need to be careful about it changing too far and too fast. Now, let's be blunt here, Tony Abbott. Has immigration added to anti-Semitism?
Well, Peter, when you listen to some of these rabid hate preachers, you've got to fear that it has. And I guess the point I keep making is that we have a duty to keep our country's character, and depending upon who comes to this country, the character of our country can change. Now, last time I heard it, the citizenship oath talked about respecting our democratic beliefs and upholding and obeying our laws. And it's hard to think that all of our recent migrants have taken that seriously. So, yes, by all means, let's maintain a non-discriminatory policy, but let's insist that all our migrants join Team Australia. They don't just live in Hotel Australia. And let's remember, assimilation is not a dirty word. In the end, integration and ultimately assimilation has got to be the objective of our immigration policy.
I'm just looking behind you there in your office in Sydney. I can see an Australian flag. I know you've got a lot of respect for the Indigenous flag. I know you've got a lot of history working for Aboriginal people, but one flag was precisely what kicked off a bit of a firestorm this week for Peter Dutton. He says if he's elected PM by the goodwill of the people, he'll only have one flag behind him in a press conference. What do you make of that?
Well, I only ever had one flag. In fact, I was sometimes taken to task for having too many flags behind me at press conferences. I quite like the idea of a backdrop of flags. I quite like the idea of an avenue of flags, but it's got to be the flag of all of us, and that's the Australian national flag. There's a time and a place for all the other flags, the state flags, the Indigenous flags, the armed forces flags, but there's only one flag for every Australian. That's the Australian national flag, and that's the one that we should proudly fly whenever we can.
Yes, I'll just make it clear to my viewers, when you're talking about you like to have lots of flags behind you, you'd like to have 10 Australian flags. You didn't have multiple flags. You just like to see lots and lots and lots of Australian flags. It drove your office crazy. Hey, I know you just got back from Washington, DC today. You met with JD Vance while you were there. You also caught up with the new British Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch. I think under both of these people, conservatism feels like it's getting a bit more robust. What are the lessons here for Australia?
Well, I think both Kemi Badenoch and the incoming Trump administration, these are all conviction politicians. They're people who stand for things, and I think Peter Dutton is very much in the same mould. I think we're sick of wishy-washy politicians. I think we're particularly sick of wishy-washy politicians on the Conservative side. As I always said, the job of an opposition is not to be a weak echo of a bad government. It's to be a strong alternative, and that's what I think Kemi Badenoch will be. That's what I'm sure Peter Dutton is. And I think that's why Donald Trump is coming into the White House, because he was a strong and clear alternative.
Now, I know you've watched this case closely. I know you've been a strong supporter in the past personally of Moira Deeming, but this judgment today from the court, I mean, an absolute slam dunk in Moira Deeming's favour. But very surprisingly this afternoon, the Liberal leader, John Pizzuto's come out to say he's not going anywhere. He basically says that there's no issues with this case, the court finding against him. Some are saying his position's untenable. I certainly am. You've led the Liberal Party in the past. Is his position untenable?
Peter, the first thing to say is that it should never be a crime within the Liberal Party for someone to stand up for the rights of women and girls. I mean, you can't buck biology. And Moira Deeming's position on the rights of women and girls, I think, was just common sense and decency. And in the end, the test here for John Pizzuto is a decency test. If you get it wrong, you apologise. And if you do someone wrong, you try to make amends as quickly as possible. So really what John Pizzuto should be doing today, what he should have done today, is publicly apologise to Moira Deeming. And given that she was kicked out of the Liberal Party on a lie, he should have indicated that as soon as possible he would be moving to have her reinstated in the Parliamentary Liberal Party from which she should never have been expelled in the first place.
Well, if he won't do that, Tony Abbott, should he resign?
Well, I believe in redemption, and I think he should have a chance to do the right thing. It surprised and disappointed me that he couldn't say sorry today. In fact, when he was asked this very question in a press conference, will you apologise to Moira Deeming? He said, I'll have to talk to my lawyers about that. Well, that's not leadership. That's hiding behind someone else.
I'll leave it there. Tony Abbott, thank you.